when we do that kind of analysis and we do that kind of comparison, we see that feminism actually has created women who are oppressed and who are very unhappy, who are very, beleaguered by the modern conception of what a woman should be and what a woman should do and how a woman should live. And all of the studies and statistics bear this out, that women are more depressed than they've ever been in countries where they have the most, that score the highest on the so-called feminist index or women's rights indices. So
what is it, Daniel? Sorry to interrupt. What is it, Daniel, specifically that is making women depressed in these very high feminist committed societies? What's going on exactly, do you think?
Well, the scientific research hasn't come to definitive conclusions because it's a highly politicized topic, right, that goes contrary to the zeitgeist, as you said, the Western modernist zeitgeist. But as Muslims, I think we can see, like when I look at my own family and I look to women in previous generations, such as my grandmothers, my grandmothers, my great-grandmothers, the way that they lived their lives and the stories I hear about how they were living. Granted, this is anecdotal, but they were living very simple lives, surrounded by loved ones, taken care of by their husbands and their male family, taking care of children, and being in these very supportive, loving households. And that was the norm. Yes, there were exceptions. Yes, there are, bad cases everywhere.
And these were extended families, weren't they? They weren't like our modern, narrow, nuclear family with just a mother and a father and 2.4 kids or whatever it is. These were much broader family structures and networks, weren't they, I think?
Yeah, of course. You had these extended families, and this is something that the vast majority of humanity has lived in this kind of, with this kind of family kinship structure. And, even if we just want to purely take an evolutionary perspective, if we want to take a purely evolutionary secular perspective, if humanity has been living in these kinds of networks with these kinds of gender roles for men and women through evolutionary processes have been conditioned to a certain kind of personality type, certain kinds of emotions, certain kinds of behavior, certain types of instincts. And then suddenly within the past 100 years, say, or 50 years, take them to a completely different mode of life, form of life, then don't you think that that's going to have a big psychological impact and arguably a destructive one? So I think even from an purely evolutionary perspective, that would make sense. But from an Islamic perspective, from the Islamic standpoint, it makes sense as well that Allah has created women with certain intuition, certain motherly instincts, a certain need to have children, a biological need to have children and nurture children and family, to be a supportive wife, to be taken care of by a strong husband who loves her and takes care of her. And this is something that the modern world denies. It fundamentally denies, you can say nature, or you can say it fundamentally denies the way that the Creator has created women and men.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fascinating article by Khalid, who I believe is your wife, actually, where she wrote incredibly articulate and hard-hitting piece about the myth, or the lie, as she calls it, that women are told that they can have it all. Women can have it all. So they can have a career, they can have highly successful jobs, and they can have a family, and they can have children, they can have everything. And she's saying this is a lie because obviously common sense would suggest one can't have it all. But this results in this kind of existential crisis that leads to depression and unhappiness that you allude to. Would that be a key factor, do you think, in what you're describing?
Yeah, why are these goals that women should have, to be, a C-level executive at a Fortune 500 company? And, why should that be a goal for women, why should that be a goal for men? I mean, we should ask these fundamental questions about the meaning of life and how we should spend the limited time we have in this dunya, on this earth. Why are these goals to pursue? Again, even if we take the assumption, the materialistic assumption that happiness is the ultimate end, okay, I think most people don't have a kind of reductionist understanding of happiness, that happiness just means dopamine, neurotransmitters in the brain. And because if that truly were the kind of happiness that humans should aspire to, then we should just be hooked up to these kind of or given Soma, right? A Brave New World, just be given certain drugs that will artificially create this sense, this high of euphoria constantly. If that's truly our view of what happiness is and how it should be pursued. But no, we have a more complex, profound understanding of human flourishing and what true happiness in its fullest sense means. I think all humans share this kind of view, and if that's the case, then why would maximizing our income at all costs, no matter what, why would that lead to that kind of happiness? Why would becoming a C-level executive for a Fortune 500 company, or becoming the most renowned academic in the university system, but you had to sacrifice all meaningful human connection? And really, I mean, this is again a scientific fact, and it's also a metaphysical truth that the deepest connections that we have as human beings are with blood, with kin. And we can obviously make connections, deep, profound connections with others who are not kin, but you cannot take a human being and break him off of all family ties and expect that he will be in his best state psychologically, even though we all know family members can be difficult. But that's also the benefit of having extended family, because if you have trouble with one or two family members, you still have an entire network, a support system to be able to live happily with and support.
So you've mentioned the difficulties that this whole the feminist thrust presents to women in terms of having it all, and that being a myth. But you also did mention that feminism is a pathway to apostasy, and in your book you do outline several stages. It doesn't start off with apostasy, far from it. That's the end stage. I think it's stage 5 or something, where after a series of struggling with the text and the hadith and the ulama and the scholarly rulings over the centuries, ultimately the Muslim feminist, as you understand them, will end up apostatizing. What is this final end stage? Why do some women anyway apostatize from Islam?
Well, they that's not their conscious goal, or they don't necessarily consciously see it happening. It's just something that they fall into because of what feminism commits them to intellectually and emotionally. Because the way that I describe the stages is that the first stage is basically coming from perhaps legitimate grievances with certain Muslim male figures that they see in their lives, maybe at the mosque or in the broader community, and they have these criticisms and they feel like, or grievances, and they feel like feminism addresses those grievances. But the thing is that feminism commits the feminist to a broader paradigm or a broader commitment, such as the idea that patriarchy is inherently oppressive, male authority is inherently male authority is inherently oppressive, and anything that lacks female representation is inherently illegitimate. So that takes them down this path. So initially it starts with these perhaps legitimate grievances with a local imam or some figure somewhere in the Muslim community, but then because of these other commitments, that criticism cannot just stop with the local imam. It has to be extended to, well, all of the Islamic scholarly tradition, because when we look at the Islamic tradition, it is predominantly Muslim men who are the main intellectuals and the main scholars of this tradition. And that's not to say that there have been female scholars, because there have been. Yeah. But they were definitely a very small minority. So then we have to ask the question, or the feminists will ask the question, why is this? And the answer that feminism gives is that the men of this tradition have been marginalizing women deliberately and have been actually silencing these women or holding them back, preventing them from speaking. That's the feminist answer. So what this colors the entire scholarly tradition. You look at someone like Imam Ghazali. Well, why isn't Imam Ghazali lifting up women? And, why is he, not bringing someone, alongside him and trying to champion women's voices? Clearly, he's marginalizing women. He's actually silencing women. He has all of this authority, and never once does he use it to promote the visibility of a woman's voice, for example. These are the kinds of thoughts that will inevitably come once you've bought in to the feminist mindset. And so this extends through all of Islamic scholarship. And once you have undermined the moral legitimacy of all of these Islamic scholars, then really, how can you access the Islam? How can you access Islam itself? The only reason that we have Islam, the only reason that we have the Quran, or we have Hadith, or we have fiqh, we have, tafsir, or the spiritual sciences of tasawwuf, or any of these important Islamic sciences, ulum, is because of this vast, rigorous tradition of Islamic transmission, the scholarly tradition. This is the only reason that we have it. So then you have fundamentally undermined that tradition just because of your feminist commitments. But it doesn't even stop there, because you have to start questioning hadith. You have to start questioning the Quran. And this is where, because it's questionable whether you can be a Muslim if you've rejected the Islamic tradition, because you have no basis for making claims about the Quran and Hadith, or you're just being intellectually inconsistent. For example, you say, I believe in, this interpretation of the Quran. Okay, well, where did you get that interpretation of the Quran? Did you take it from a scholar? From Ibn Kathir or Imam Qurtubi, from the tafsir tradition, or you just happen to have a understanding of the Quran on your own that happens to match the orthodox interpretation? How convenient. But in reality, we see most of these feminists completely heterodox and bring these deviant, bizarre interpretations of the Quran, and academics such as Amina Wadud, for example, who says outright that we should have the ability to say no to the Quran. If we have a moral problem with something that we read in the Quran and we see that this is contrary to our conscience, then we should have the moral right to say no to the Quran. And she's made infamous.
It's a very difficult thing to understand, because the Quran describes itself as the actual speech of God himself. So it sounds like they're inviting people to say no to God. And people who say no to God are not normally characterized as believers, rather as anti-believers and so on. I'm reading from a very moderate translation here. This is a translation of the Quran by Abdul Halim, the famous British scholar, and just the famous 4:34, Surah 4, verse 34, which you allude to several times in your book, and there are different translations of it. And this is a very moderate translation. It says, husbands should take good care of their wives with the bounties God has given to some more than others, and with what they spend out of their own money. Righteous wives are devout and guard what God has given them, what God would have them guard in their husband's absence, and so on. But this is clearly patriarchal. and this is God speaking. If you're a Muslim, obviously. And there are many similar verses in the New Testament and in the Jewish Bible, and probably in most scriptures in the world's religions, if not all scriptures of the world's religions. So to say no to God, whatever tradition you're in, is quite a big price to pay for your conscience, as you put it.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually the nature of feminism. From the first wave of feminism, activists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, for example, or Susan B. Anthony, they were very rabidly anti-religious. And they identified, like, this is the main support behind patriarchy as a concept within society is religion. And so they were, they understood very well their project to attack the church and to attack the Bible. They even wrote, the Woman's Bible as a kind of act of defiance against the church. Like, and this is, we're talking about the 19th century. Imagine someone like a Muslim today. We can complain about Amina Wadud saying no to the Quran, but she, to her credit, she hasn't written a woman's Quran. Right. So this is, but these are the type of people that Muslim feminists hold in high regard as the founders of the feminist movement, and it's anti-religion from its very beginning.
So it seems to me, and people do this, they're not just on this issue, but on the issue, the homosexuality issue and so on. They can say about the Bible, well, the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1 or 1 Corinthians 6:9, he didn't really understand modern understandings of homosexuality. And therefore, he said it's strictly cultural, it's irrelevant, we leave it 2,000 years ago. But you're talking about the Quran, which every syllable claims to be from God. You can't say that God didn't understand. He is eternally present. He understands everything. And this is his final commandment, his final word to mankind from a Muslim point of view. So you can't make that hermeneutical move. You're simply not open to one, I don't think, Islamically anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Quran is setting a moral standard from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam till the end of time. And if you're going to have a moral objection, that's going to create problems for your faith.
Okay. Well, that's very, very interesting. Thank you for that. Perhaps